Hi everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I'm your host, Jessica King, and I just wanted to quickly thank you for joining us today. November is Diabetes Awareness Month, and throughout the month of November, Kelsey-Seybold Clinic, in partnership with the American Diabetes Association and Lubies, are working together to beat diabetes. This is the last of the 3 webinars that we will host this month, focusing on preventing and managing diabetes. Today we'll discuss how you can eat out with diabetes. Today's speaker, registered dietitian Ronda Elsenbrook, will go over some tips and what to keep in mind while dining out at a restaurant if you have diabetes. Here's a little more info on today's speaker. Ronda is a registered dietitian at Kelsey-Seybold. She practices at 2 Kelsey-Seybold locations, the Meyerland Plaza and Fort Bend Medical and Diagnostic Center, and she has been with Kelsey-Seybold since October 2009. And don't forget, we'll be taking any questions you may have at the end of the webinar. If one happens to pop up, just type it into your question box and we'll do our best to address it at the end of the presentation. And now I'll hand it over to you, Rhonda.
Well, thank you for joining me today. Dining out's always a fun topic, and we're going to go over how to manage eating out when you're still trying to make those healthy choices to manage diabetes. It's important to remember that you're always in control of what and how much you put into your body. So regardless of what a restaurant will serve you, you get to choose the amount you eat at that meal. You get to choose how it's prepared, and that's going to directly affect those overall calories, fat, and sugar content. We all know that fried foods are not the healthiest choice for our bodies. But when you're looking at a menu, you'll often find a variety of words used to describe different items that are very enticing to that hungry palate. Things like crunchy, tempura, which is usually found in sushi restaurants, battered, crispy, breaded, crusted, golden, or sizzling are all trick words. Don't let these words fool you. They all mean fried. When foods are breaded and cooked in oil and butter, they absorb the grease and they can add significant calories to your meal as well as increase your blood sugars. Just by frying chicken compared to baking or roasting, you can add 200 extra calories. The fat also raises blood sugar. It's not sugar itself, but it acts like clutter basically in your bloodstream. It's going to interfere with how quickly your body is able to move that sugar from the blood into the cell. And as that sugar is lingering in the blood, you're going to notice that when you check your blood sugars, and it will remain higher for a couple of hours after that meal, even if you've managed the sugar content and it's appropriate in that meal. With diabetes, we all know that sugar is something to be aware of, and we need to limit the amounts that we eat. But again, restaurants are going to use a different variety of words that hide these added sugars, and they're generally going to be found in different dressings and sauces. So look for some of these words on the menu: teriyaki, barbecue, glazed, sticky, honey dipped. If you enjoy these sauces, you can still have them, but always ask for them to be placed on the side. Again, this is going to allow you more control of how much is added to your food. So even if foods don't contain actual sugar, all types of carbohydrates are still sugar to the body. If a food is made from any type of grain, or it's a starchy root vegetable, it's still going to raise the blood sugar just like real sugar. Our bodies really cannot tell the difference. Remember though, sugar is not your enemy. It is our fuel source, and we need some of it throughout the day. We just don't need large amounts at one time. So choose your favorite at that moment and keep the portion appropriate for your meal plan. If you are ever unsure about what amount is right for you, a good rule to follow is to keep your portion the size of your fist or smaller. Even a more nutritious version of these grain foods like whole wheat pasta, brown rice, or quinoa is still a carbohydrate. It's still going to turn into sugar, and needs to be portion controlled. Another way restaurants can entice us is with comfort words. Most of us don't just eat for fuel or just because we're starving and to stop the hunger. We eat with all of our senses, our sense of smell, taste, and texture, and that's going to direct our food choices. Restaurants will try to tempt us with comfort foods like loaded, stuffed, creamy, cheesy, gooey, smothered, melted, rich, and velvety. These all mean the food has been prepared with a lot of extra hidden fat. Some better options are foods that contain words like roasted, baked, or braised, broiled, poached, rubbed, seared, grilled, steamed, sautéed, spiced, or seasoned. Now, these cooking options still involve added butters and oils, but it's easier to make special requests to the kitchen and have these foods prepared with less oil or no added fat at all. Now, I generally do not recommend fast food as an option for anybody on a regular basis. But, there's always times when you're traveling or there's other circumstances and you just have limited choices and you've got to find something to eat. It is still possible to make a better selection. To reduce your portion, choose a smaller entree, such as maybe a kid's meal or getting a smaller sandwich or burger, and you can always add a side salad to get some of those healthy non-starchy vegetables. Many burgers and sandwiches are made with extra mayonnaise or sauces, and that's where they can hide some of the hidden saturated fats or trans fats. So order these things without the added fat to it, and then you can add it in small portions if you desire. Do not add any more salt to your food. Fast foods are generally already prepared with a lot of added salts in them, but you can choose to not add more at the table. Think about the foods that contain carbohydrates at these meals. And again, you just want to be selective about which ones that you want the most. Do you really need both slices of bread for your burger or sandwich and that large order of fries all at the same meal? Maybe at that particular moment the bread is more desirable for you and you really want that sandwich or burger, so skip the fries and get the side salad or just eat the sandwich or burger. But let's say you really love those fries. They're your favorite thing and you really want them at that meal. So just order the burger and don't eat the bread or only eat half, maybe an open-faced, and enjoy a part of the order of fries, but not the entire order. Think about what you're going to be drinking with these meals. A lot of the fast food meals all come with some type of beverage. You can always choose water and add lemon to it, or you can drink a beverage that's unsweetened, like your unsweetened tea, or do something sugar-free lemonade or sugar-free soda. If you are on a meal plan and you know how to carb count, you can use those carbohydrate counting skills to follow that plan, just whatever the dietitian, diabetes educator, or doctor has designed for you. You always have that to work with. Overall, always remember that you are in control and you're paying for this meal, so you have every right to have it made the way you desire. I frequently order things that are not directly on the menu, and most restaurants are very happy to accommodate. Some of the things to think about before you go to that restaurant: does the restaurant even offer a variety of choices? Most restaurants today have everything online. You can go and look at their menus online. Most of the nutrition information is also available to help you make different choices. Think about, does the restaurant allow substitutions without charging you extra? I personally have never been charged except for if I chose a more expensive protein such as shrimp versus chicken. Also, can you split that entree without the extra charge? Some restaurants will tell you up front if they split it in the kitchen, they're going to charge you, but if you do it at the table, there's no additional charge. Can I order dressings and sauces on the side? And can the food be prepared without extra butter or salt? Basically, if you have a person cooking your food, it's not a corporation, the answer to those are always yes. They can make it any way you desire. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Your server is very knowledgeable, or should be very knowledgeable, about what's in the kitchen, and they can help you with knowing how things can be prepared. Think about that portion control. Most serving sizes in restaurants are very large. So share the food with someone at your table, or if you're tempted to not be able to take part of it home, ask the server to bring you that to-go box with your meal. Before you even take that first bite, put half away and then only eat what's left on your plate. Always ask the waiter to not serve those bread and chip baskets if it's not part of your meal plan. Think about healthier substitutions. Vegetables are always a great idea, and restaurants have vegetables in the kitchen. You just may need to ask for them, and they can always be substituted by instead of that regular order of potatoes or rice. If you want to have an alcoholic beverage, think about, choosing something that doesn't have all of the high-calorie mixers. So when we think of things like margaritas and daiquiris, or mixed drinks that are some particular liquor mixed with a tonic or soda or juice, the mixers are where those hidden sugars are. So choosing something like a glass of wine or beer, or getting a mixed drink with club soda or water or a diet soda is always a good option. Most restaurants today have basically skinny versions of their margaritas. And even if it's not on the menu, if you ask, they generally can comply with that kind of thing. So we've talked about how to make different selections, how to choose healthier options, things to avoid. We've talked about, portion control and ways for you to shrink the amount that you're given. But the last thing that's equally important is the timing of your meals. When you have diabetes, it's important to eat regularly throughout the day, especially if you're taking any of the diabetes medications or insulin. When you're eating out and someone else is preparing your food, you can't always control things like how long you have to wait for that table, or if you're meeting people, how long it's going to take for them to show up, or how slow the kitchen is that day and when the food's actually going to get there. So always plan ahead and think, how long has it been since your previous meal? You may need to have a small snack if it's been too many hours before you go to the restaurant. That small snack before you go, like a handful of almonds or maybe just part of an apple, will definitely control your hunger as well and make you be more able to basically avoid that bread basket. Overall, think through some of the tips that we've done the next time you're eating out. You could enjoy something else, somebody else cooking for you occasionally and still maintain good control if you just take the time to think through the different options.
Okay, it looks like we have about 15 minutes left for questions, so we'll open up the questions for y'all. And I actually want to start off, and I want to ask, should certain foods be avoided if you are considered pre-diabetic?
Really, there's no food that you have to avoid with diabetes or pre-diabetes. It's a matter of the portion and balancing things. What we would recommend is you start out by avoiding the liquid sugars. So beverages such as juice, soda, sweet tea, those are things to get rid of in the diet or definitely minimize. But the food itself, it's all about that portion and balance.
Okay. So you mentioned a lot about calorie intake and watching your calories. Is there a certain way to keep track of that, or do you like a certain app or anything?
Well, there's an app for everything. So my favorite app, because simply the size of the database and what I've found people find easier to use, is the MyFitnessPal app. It's also a website, myfitnesspal.com, but there's Lose It, there's Spark People, there's a lot of apps out there, and they're free to download. And you just tell it what you ate, and it can look up all forms of calories, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
Okay, great. We have a question here. How many grams of sugar a day is a safe number?
It's not so much, when we're dealing with diabetes, it's not so much how much you eat in a whole day. Your body burns sugar all the time, 24 hours a day. So it has to do with the amount of carbohydrate that you're consuming at any given time. Just keep in mind, our bodies cannot tell the difference from like white table sugar, brown sugar, honey, or some type of grain or starch. It's all a matter of that portion.
Okay. Someone's asking that why they feel nauseous in the morning after they eat sweets, or why they feel nauseous after they eat carbohydrates at dinner.
That's an interesting question. They would have to look for patterns and see, does it happen every single time? Does it happen with specific foods? That's not something that should generally happen. So we have a question about reading a food label. That's a very good question. So when you look at your standard food labels, there's a lot of information under that nutrition facts. The first thing that you need to look at is, what is that serving size? Because the food companies get to pick that quantity, and they'll often shrink that the portion size, serving size, to make all their other numbers look better. So be aware of how much food they're talking about, and then skip down and you're wanting to look at the total carbohydrate. So sugar, it's very sneaky, but it's slightly indented. It's part of the total carbohydrate, but not all of it. And again, our bodies cannot tell the difference between carbs and sugars. It's all sugar. So only look at the total carbohydrate. That is the amount your body is going to get that will turn into sugar. And you're going to be looking for that compared to what is in your meal plan. For most adults, it's somewhere between 30-45 grams of carbohydrate per meal.
Okay. We have another question here. Is it better to eat low glycemic foods versus higher glycemic foods, such as dried fruits?
The glycemic index has been around a really long time. It has to do with how much that particular food item, is going to raise blood sugar compared to a set food such as a piece of white bread or a white potato. The problem with glycemic index is we don't eat in isolation. We eat with other foods. And so you can't really isolate that particular food and its effect on your blood sugar depending on what you eat with it. So in general, though, lower glycemic foods are higher in fiber, which helps you feel fuller. But if it's a carbohydrate, if it's a grain or a starchy food, it's still going to raise your blood sugar.
Okay. We have a question here. A lot of people like Mexican restaurants, and you said to avoid margaritas, which are obviously popular at Mexican restaurants.
Or do the skinny.
Or the skinny, yes. Is there any suggestions that you have for menu-wise at a Mexican restaurant?
Well, with diabetes, it's all about the carbohydrates. So when you look at what is in front of you at a Mexican food restaurant that's carbohydrate, you just need to be selective. You can't eat everything at one time. So depending on how many servings is in your meal plan, if you're trying to stick with 2 servings or 3 servings or even 4 servings of carbohydrate at that meal, think about what are your choices. You have chips when you get there. You have tortillas that are carbohydrate, and you also have rice and beans. So between those foods, just decide at that meal, what do you want the most? And choose that and keep it within your portion. Skip the things that are not as important to you. Save those for another time. And that way you'll always leave happy.
Okay. We have a question here. How much water should you drink a day, or is the 8 ounces still valid, or do you do a certain calculation?
It is still valid, the 8 ounce glasses, which no one has 8 ounce glasses anymore. So 64 ounces a day is kind of the bare minimum I always start people with. And if you're, a very active person in Houston in the summer, or you're just, a bigger person, sometimes you need more. So in general, between 64 and 80 ounces of water is what I recommend. Most, if not all of that, should be true plain water, not just other beverages.
Okay, we have another question here. What's the best way to satisfy a sweet tooth?
Well, there's nothing wrong with having a sweet tooth, but you will find that the more sweet you eat, the more your body craves. We tend to build up a tolerance to that. So it's always a good idea to, if you want something sweet, try to have a little sample of it after a meal where you're already full, you're not hungry. And it's much easier to have a bite or two of something when you're not hungry just for the taste of it than it is if you try to wait and then eat it by itself, because then there's always that desire for a little more.
Okay. And I think we've touched on this topic a little bit, or we have in past webinars. Is it okay to drink diet drinks, or should that just be something avoided altogether?
Well, the issue with diet drinks is what I just mentioned as far as that, tasting of something sweet. If you're drinking things that are sweet, even if they're not real sugar, you're still training that palate to want something sweet. And oftentimes I'll have people come in and they tell me they hate water. They just can't stand it. And it's typically because all they drink is something sweet, whether it's real sugar or fake sugar. And they've lost their ability to tolerate more bitter things such as plain water. So diet drinks are a better idea than real sugar drinks for people with diabetes or people trying to watch their weight, but none of that should replace your water intake. So it should be the little extras that make you happy.
Okay, I have a quick question. So a lot of the times people are on the go and they don't have time to prepare a lunch the night before or dinner, just busy lives. What are some healthy options for, say, a frozen dinner?
So frozen dinners are not quite as bad as they used to be. The food industry definitely has come up with some healthier options, but you've got to be label savvy. You've got to be looking at the label to see, again, do the carbohydrates fit what you need for your meal? Also keep an eye on the sodium. That's what gets us with these convenient frozen foods, is how much salt that they put in there to preserve. So, a general healthy sodium intake is around 2,000 milligrams a day. So if that's your entire meal, as long as it stays, in the 400 milligram or less, that's pretty reasonable, as long as you don't eat other things at that meal that would add up too high. So some of the healthier options, the Healthy Choice, Smart Ones, Amy's, Lean Cuisine, there's plenty on the market to choose from, and there's even some new brands that are coming out that I haven't tried yet, but there's definitely options.
Okay, I'm going to try to mesh two questions together. Is too much fresh fruit bad for you? And also, can you eat as many fresh fruits and vegetables as you want, or should you limit that?
Good question, because we always hear about the importance of eating fruits and vegetables, but they're not equal. Fruit is still a natural sugar, and a piece of fruit has just as much sugar content as a piece of bread or even a half a cup of ice cream. So you don't want to eat these just endless amounts of fruit, but it definitely can give you good vitamins and minerals and fiber. So count it as your carb, but from a vegetable standpoint, eat as much as you possibly can, because they've got only good things for you.
We touched on dressings earlier. Is there a better salad dressing than the others, or should it just be fat-free or light?
I personally am not a big fan of the fat-free and the light. I don't enjoy the flavor, and when you're doing things like salad dressing and you're adding stuff to your food, you want to get that pleasure from it, but just be light-handed with it. So the best salad dressing is the one that you love the most, but don't use very much. From a healthy standpoint, I mean, obviously if you made it yourself, that would be even better. But just pick the one that you like, and then just be very light-handed with how much you add.
Someone has a question here. What can be done about diabetics with no appetite?
And I do hear this sometimes, usually if you'll just keep things small, if you're not hungry but you know you have to eat because it's that time and you're going to have a low blood sugar, it can be a snack. It doesn't need to be a full meal. So when people tell me they only like to eat once a day or maybe only twice a day because they're not that hungry, when we really start talking about it, if they shrunk the portions at their meals and then threw in that extra snack, they can break that up and eat, about every 4 to 5 hours like is recommended.
Okay. Here's a good question. Is it okay to eat a high carb diet if you are exercising regularly?
Well, carbohydrates are your fuel, so the more you move, the more you get to eat, basically. You still need to keep an eye on the quantity. If you've got diabetes, you've got to manage, how much carb you're eating at any given time, even with exercise. But yes, you basically can eat a little bit more as long as you're moving.
Okay, this question kind of leads into that. The Nature Valley granola bar has 29 grams of total carbs. Is it healthy to eat 2 of those at one time, or should you limit the intake on those?
Well, keep in mind that's a grain, so even though they're touted as a healthy bar, it's still a grain food. 60 grams of total carbohydrate at one sitting is pretty hefty amount for most adults. You want to try to keep that maybe just to the one bar and then add some protein. Protein is where you get fullness, not from your grains and starches. That's our energy, but it's not fullness. So just maybe take the granola bar and put a nice little smear of peanut butter or almond butter, and that would fill you.
All right. Thanksgiving is next week. Any tips on what to eat? Should you sit down and eat the big meal? Should you snack all day instead, or?
Well, don't save up. So don't starve all day long until you get to that big meal and then think you can overdo it at the meal and it's okay. It doesn't work that way. The body burns all the time, but it doesn't like to burn volume at one time. So, snack maybe on lighter foods, as you normally would. And then when you approach that Thanksgiving meal, just try to focus on the things that are most important to you. If you really love that dressing with the turkey, and that's something you only get once a year, then let those carb grams be for that and maybe skip the roll that you could have at another time.
All right. And it looks like that's all of the questions that we had. So that's going to conclude our webinar today. We hope the information was very helpful to y'all. I want to give a very big thank you to you, Rhonda, for doing such a great job. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Also, don't forget to go to kelseybeatsdiabetes.com for more info about our month-long campaign. During the month of November, dine at any participating Luby's restaurants in the greater Houston area and try one of their featured healthier menu options. And consider making a donation to support diabetes research and programs. Remember to register for next month's webinar, Safety First, Preventing Holiday Hazards, featuring family medicine Dr. Christine Lay. And don't forget to follow us on social media and join in on the conversation. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next month.